In Russia last year, the share of acquittals amounted to zero, as much as 33/100%. For every 300 sentences, there was only one acquittal. In just 2022 years, 614,725 people were convicted. About 2,060 defendants received acquittals. This story began on the 24th of August, 2021 year. Further from the words of Kristina Solodovnikova, the mother of Danil Krasny. Both brothers played on the playground and walked under the supervision of their mother. After a while, the younger son got thirsty. Kristina gave Danila a card, and both sons went to the store, which was a 5-minute walk from home. The woman remained waiting for them near the house. The children returned from the store alarmed. The little one was scared and crying. Kristina realized from the older man's face that something was wrong. She asked what happened. The little one, in hysterics, said that Danya was beaten by boys. Everyone went home together. It was about 19 o'clock. At home, when the children had calmed down a little, Kristina began to ask what had happened. Danil said that they met a group of teenagers on the way from the store, who called him by name and offered to step aside. There were also 2 girls standing nearby. They were cousins. The eldest of them was 13 years old, the youngest 6. Teenagers began to ask Danil questions, whether he climbed into the underpants to the younger girl. To which Danila answered in the negative. After that, one of the teenagers hit Danil twice, continuing to ask the same question about the younger girl. 3-year-old brother Danila began to cry, which is why the teenagers hurried to leave. Danila and his brother returned home. They didn't go out on the street that day anymore. Around 11 in the evening, the phone rang. Kristina's mom called and said that his son was wanted by the police. Allegedly, Danila molested the girl. Then the inspector picked up the phone and asked Kristina and her son to come to the store for 24 hours. Referring to the late time and the need to put the youngest child to bed, Kristina asked the inspector to come to their place of residence. About half an hour later, the inspector came, the girl and her mother. The law enforcement officer said that Kristina's son molested this girl. Kristina invited everyone to go to the kitchen. The girl was playing. Nothing indicated that someone had offended her. She began to ask the girl what happened, when it happened, and what exactly she accuses Danila of, because the charges are quite serious. At first, the girl said that everything happened in the afternoon. However, Kristina replied that Danil did not go out that day. Then the girl said that everything happened the day before yesterday. She could not specify the time. According to her first version, Danil was alone. But when Kristina replied that he only walks with his younger brother, the girl confirmed that Danil was really with his brother. According to Kristina, she couldn't even figure out where it was happening. She began to question the girl's mother, who said that it was the first time she had ever heard about what had happened from the inspectors. That the girl had never complained to her, and that if it hadn't been for the traffic police inspectors, she wouldn't have found out anything. The inspector himself joined the conversation. He said that he was called to the store 24 hours on a completely different matter. But in between, the girl said that Danil Krasny had molested her, and he needed to work out this statement. And this was another thing like this. PD employees were called because the girl was on the street at the grocery store for 24 hours in the company of an adult unknown man. Allegedly, one of the guys with whom the girl was walking that evening said this to someone from passersby, who called the guards. When the PD officers arrived at the scene and began to find out what had happened, the boy, a 13-year-old friend of the girl, said that he had seen her in the arms of an adult unknown man who allegedly touched her or kissed her on the cheek. According to this man himself, he was walking past the store around 11 o'clock in the evening and met a little girl alone. The baby was crying. He approached the child to ask what had happened and where her parents were. He took her in his arms and began to regret. And at that moment, a 13-year-old friend of the girl appeared, who decided that the man was bothering her. That's when the police were called. And some time earlier, that evening, Danil and his 3-year-old brother went to the store and ran into this company. A girl, her 13-year-old friend, and 2 other guys. They approached Danil and started asking if he had touched this girl. Danil said he didn't touch it. They hit him, broke his nose in the presence of his younger brother, and went to look for another boy, who, according to the girl's stories, also touched her genitals. The guys also found that boy and started running after him around the store with threats. That's why the girl started crying. And then there was a man who began to calm her down. During this conversation, Christina could not get any answers to the question, when was it? What was that? The inspector accepted explanations from everyone. The girl and her mother left. The inspector stayed to take statements from his son, where he was on what days, and what he did. The next morning, Christina took her youngest son to kindergarten, and with the eldest, Danila. They went home to that girl. Mom wasn't at home. There was an uncle and an aunt of the girl. They live in the same apartment. They told the guests that the girl was a great inventor, and they had already had situations of this kind in their memory. She blamed their son for this. But it was inside the family, and this rumor did not spread. Kristina Solodovnikova herself saw these children together quite often. He is older than the girl and her cousin. Also, the uncle and aunt said that the girl's mother does not deal with the child particularly, and said that if it is necessary to talk to her mother in person, then it is necessary to come after lunch. After that, Christina and Danilo went to the police department to report that her son had been beaten the day before. She wrote a statement, after which the mother and son returned home. And in the evening of the same day, they went to the girl's mother again, this time taking their youngest son with them. The girl's mother and grandmother were at home. Mom said again that she didn't know anything, didn't notice anything, that the girl never complained, that the situation is incomprehensible to her. Christina asked her as a mother to try to talk to the girl, to find out from her the details of what happened. Since the girl is only 6 years old, the situation itself is not easy. Christina advised the girl's mother to contact a psychologist so that he could talk to the child and find out everything delicately. To which the woman replied that she did not know who exactly to turn to, that she would go on vacation in September, and even then turn to a psychologist. In turn, Christina advised to contact the PD, to their psychologists or inspectors. Maybe they will advise or talk to her themselves. However, according to Christina's feelings, that family never turned anywhere. Later, a traffic police inspector called, who Christina wrote a statement about beating Danila, and asked her and her son to come. She explained that the mother of the boy who beat Danila, he was found quite quickly, wants to apologize. The PD inspector assured that they were children and everything happens. At this age, such behavior is not uncommon. Why spoil their lives and so on? Christina agreed. From the very beginning, Danil's mother was most concerned about the fact that her child was accused of such a serious crime. Only on the basis of the stories of a 6-year-old girl. Christina Solodovnikova is sure that her son could not have committed such actions. According to her, he respects the girls, but at the moment, which is considered the moment of the crime in the case, Danil was with his 3-year-old brother, and such a picture simply does not fit in my mother's head. According to Christina, the investigator in this criminal case initially talked about punishing her son for a period of 12 to 20 years. Christina assures that her son did not commit what he is accused of, and she has strong evidence for this. Her children do not go unattended. Christina submitted a petition to the investigator to undergo a polygraph, because the investigator initially took a rather strange position. I see the whole picture, I'm not going to explain anything to you. In principle, there are no witnesses in the materials of this criminal case. No one saw anything. The girl's words are against Danil's words. Initially, the investigator refused to undergo polygraph tests on Danila, referring to the fact that he does not have the appropriate status for this. The case is still at the stage of pre-trial verification, and he has no right to undergo research. After these words, Christina and Danila decided to undergo polygraph tests on their own. They have documents that they passed it, and the polygraph showed that the guy didn't do it, according to the conclusion of the expert who conducted the inspection. The first one? Stable psychophysical reactions indicating that the minor Krasny Danil Igorovich offered to undress in front of him, or undress the minor himself, were not revealed. Second, stable psychophysical reactions indicating that the minor read Danil Igorovich touched. The sexual organs of the minor were not identified. Third, stable psychophysical reactions indicating that the minor read Danil Igorovich showed his sexual organ to a minor. were not detected. Fourth, stable psychophysical reactions, indicating that the minor Krasny Danil Igorovich confessed to committing the above actions against a minor, were not identified. According to Christina, the gynecologist also examined the girl and revealed the absence of suspicious traces on the girl. She asked the investigator for a long time to agree to interview witnesses. Their neighbors who saw Danila almost every day and who would be able to characterize her children. But the question of witnesses was refused. According to Christina, she devotes a lot of time to her children. Her husband often goes on business trips, and she spends all her free time with the children. They walk in the yard, in the park and so on, but always together. Danil is not used to walking alone. He communicates with his peers only at school and in the section. He is constantly under supervision. He has no permissiveness. And he has responsibility for his younger brother. He spends most of his time with him. They walk only with their mother or with their grandmother, Christina's mother. They practically do not walk alone. At the school where Danil studied, a characteristic was also compiled. During his studies, Danil has established himself as an able, organized, and diligent student. In school, he is attentive, disciplined, and accurate. Has an excellent memory, developed speech. The material explained by the teacher learns well. Has a high school motivation and a positive attitude to school life, studies well and excellently. Danil lives with his mother, stepfather, and brother. He doesn't keep in touch with his own father. Family relationships are friendly, based on mutual trust and support. Family members monitor the observance of school disciplines and academic performance. The family belongs to the poor, receives child benefits. The level of physical development is high. The physical culture group is the main one. Danil is responsible for carrying out public assignments. By nature, he is a balanced, seasoned, sociable, and responsive student. Tactful. The style of relationships with classmates and teachers is based on mutual understanding, support, cooperation. He enjoys respect among classmates and teachers. He is a sincere, benevolent, compassionate student, responsible for his actions. Striving for harmonious relations between people. Danil's parents constantly keep in touch with the class teacher, regularly attend parent-teacher meetings. Take an active part in the upbringing of their son. Even at the stage of verification, Danila's lawyers Voya Parapecheva and Victoria Grigorieva filed petitions to interview additional witnesses who, in their opinion, needed to be interrogated, and to conduct a polygraph examination of witnesses who accused Danila. These petitions were denied. After that, on October 18, 2021, a criminal case was initiated. Danil was charged, after which he was detained and placed in a temporary detention center for a day, and was held there together with adult criminals. At the end of the day, a court hearing was held on the election of a preventive measure, within which the investigator demanded to choose a preventive measure in the form of detention. But together with the lawyers, and thanks to the positive characteristics of Danil Krasny from school, sports sections from neighbors, firm PD from KDN, the lawyers managed to convince the court that there is no need for such a strict measure of restraint. And he was given a preventive measure with a ban on certain actions. He was not allowed to leave the residential premises where he was registered from 2200 to 600. An electronic bracelet was attached to Danila's leg. According to Christina, the child attended training from 20 to 2200, 3 times a week. But now he had to leave them earlier. In order for him to get home on time, he had to be constantly nervous. According to the mother, their whole life was turned upside down. Their family was registered with the Commission for Minors, who constantly come. Starting from the 24th of August, mom and son were constantly called somewhere. Someone constantly came to them. And checks were also arranged. Danila was constantly being pulled out of school. It was constantly necessary to be interrogated. Then to sign documents, then somewhere else. At that time, he was in the 9th grade. Preparation for exams was underway. The child moved out very much according to estimates, stopped having time to assimilate the school curriculum, was in constant stress. Even basic personal hygiene has become a completely different process for Danila due to the presence of a bracelet on his leg. As part of the initiated criminal case, the lawyers independently submitted an application to an expert to conduct a psychophysiological examination of their client on a polygraph. With the consent of Danil's mother, the polygraph was conducted and attached to the case materials. According to the conclusions of the expert, the polygraph found that the defendant never committed the actions of which he is accused. And he never admitted to anyone, either under pressure or under other circumstances, that he had done such a thing. It is worth noting that according to the Criminal Procedure Code, the results of polygraph tests do not relate to evidence, only at the discretion of the court and the investigation. Although, according to practice, the court may appoint a psychophysical examination on a polygraph in situations where it is difficult to obtain reliable information in other ways. The defendant's side conducted such a study independently. And it is worth noting that there are no more weighty arguments or evidence in the materials of this case. Only the words of a girl against the words of a boy. Whether or not to accept the results of the polygraph as evidence is decided by the investigation and the court. But at the initial stage of the investigation refused to take the results of this examination into account. According to the lawyers, as part of the criminal case, they filed a petition to conduct confrontations with witnesses, with the girl herself, with her client. They filed a petition for the interrogation of additional witnesses that are available from the defense. It was also repeatedly stated about the request to conduct a polygraph by a witness, and once again to the defendant as part of the investigation. But the investigators were denied this for the second time. The lawyers also filed a motion to make some changes to the resolution on conducting a psychological and psychiatric examination of the girl, which they were also mostly denied. It turns out that all the accusations of harassment against a 6-year-old girl were voiced by a PD employee, by her 13-year-old friend from her own words. All the accusations against Danil are based solely on his words, according to the girl's stories. As a result, it was not possible to find out what happened to the adult man who allegedly calmed the girl, put her on his knees, and kissed her. A criminal case was opened against Danil. And another boy, whose harassment the girl also pointed out, apparently had more luck. He was not brought to criminal responsibility. The girl herself was confused in her testimony and could not even name the exact date and time of the incident. As a result, a copy of the resolution of the Volgodonsk District Court on the election of a preventive measure of Danil noted the following. Krasny Danil Igorovich is suspected of being a person who has reached the age of 14. During the period from June 20, 2021 year to August 1, 2021 year. From 14 hours 0 minutes to 19 hours 0 minutes. Committed other acts of a sexual nature using the helpless state of the victim. The spread by dates is a month and a half, by time, 5 hours. A question arises. If the girl was subjected to violent acts by Danila, why didn't she tell her mother about it on the same day? And if this really happened, why didn't mom notice any changes in her daughter's behavior on December 20th? 2021 year, an issue of the male-female program called Big Little Lies was released on Channel 1, in which the case of Danil Krasny was discussed.
Kristina Solodovnikova from the Rostov region is in our studio today.
Daniel's mother, Kristina Solodovnikova, the mother of the girl who accused him, were invited to the program.
You're covering up for your future pedophile?
Assistant to the deputy of the Volgodonsk City Duma, Irina Litvinova.
And the daughter, no matter what happens, must run to her mother.
Aunts of the injured girl. Why are you starting to bully us? Interviews were also shown with Danil Krasny's neighbors and with children who took part in the conflict with the beating of Danil.
At 10 o'clock in the evening, she can walk safely. This is Yana.
Yes, it is. A normal boy is so calm. He always walks with his brother.
She constantly clings to them and sits on her hands. She's on her own. She can get ready, go for a walk. You never know what a child could say. She's such a dreamer. She's a dreamer. No one was watching her.
The hosts of the program, Alexander Gordon and Yulia Buranovskaya, listened to both women, the girl's aunt, as well as their friends and neighbors from Volgodonsk, who described the girl and Danila. The program was held in raised tones. The guests of the program took turns accusing each other of lying, and the audience and experts in the studio tried to figure out who the truth was, because the criminal case of sexual harassment is based solely on the words of a girl against the words of a boy. It's all over the roof. I don't want not to see, not to hear.
And I want to say that she would lie. She would change some words.
Just the opposite. And why does she have a girl walking around the village alone? Why does her girl sit down with an unknown man? That is, I understand, so there is no evidence. Meanwhile, according to the local edition of the Volgodonsk Notebook, its own source, new facts have been revealed in the investigation of this criminal case. As it became known to the source of the kindergarten teacher who attended the injured girl, they have repeatedly noticed her addiction to touching herself by the sexual organ in the toilet, including in the presence of boys, thereby showing sexual concern. According to the results of the transfer to the deputy head of the Volgodonsk Administration for Social Development, Svetlana Saiba, Channel 1 sent a letter with the following content: the Directorate of Social and Journalistic Programs of Channel 1, and the editorial board of the male-female program with Alexander Gordon. The filming of the program Big Little Lies was carried out on the situation in which minors found themselves. The program aired on December 21st, 2021 year. We would like to inform you that, as part of the shooting of the program, facts were discovered that the 6-year-old victim was left unattended by her mother. According to neighbors, the girl is constantly seen on the street alone or accompanied by teenagers. Videos commenting on this situation were presented in the program. We inform you that this situation poses a threat to the life and health of the child, and we ask you to report this potentially dangerous situation to the guardianship and guardianship authorities of the city of Volgodonsk. We also inform you that in a personal conversation with Danil Krasny's lawyer and Vola Parapecheva, in the presence of the editorial staff of the male and female program, the girl's mother repeatedly said that she had brought charges against Danil Krasny, under pressure from the investigator for particularly important cases. According to the woman, she initially did not believe her daughter's accusations against Danilo, as the girl is prone to fantasize and exaggerate the strength of age and the lack of proper control by adults, and was seen in this earlier. Given the circumstances in this family, we ask you to take control of this situation. We count on your understanding. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. The letter signed by Anna Shipova, senior editor of the Directorate of Social and Journalistic Programs of Channel 1, and Artem Zaynutian, editor of the Directorate of Social and Journalistic Programs of Channel 1, was sent by email to Svetlana Saiba, deputy head of the Volgodonsk Administration for Social Development. On the 10th of January 2022 year, the hashtag I Believe Danilo appeared on the network. It was created by Volgodonchenka Elena Marushkina, who is very concerned about the fate of the Volgodonsk boy. The hashtag on social networks was immediately supported by many users who are not indifferent to this story. People are actively posting posts on their pages in support of Danil Krasny. Due to the mass participation in social networks with the hashtag I Believe, Danil managed to attract the maximum attention of the Information Center of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation. Users reacted not only to the city of Volgodonsk and the Rostov region, and even not only people from Russia. Some residents of Brazil and African countries have joined the support of Danil, who also published this hashtag on their pages. According to lawyer Viola Parapecheva, at the end of 2021 year, according to all the prescribed rules, an appointment was made for a personal appointment with the chairman of the investigative committee, Alexander Bastrikin. Due to COVID restrictions, a personal reception was held in the format of a video conference call, which did not require a personal departure. As of the beginning of the 2022 year, a number of petitions were filed for some kind of investigative actions. At that time, the witnesses claimed by the lawyers had not yet been interviewed. There were no confrontations between child witnesses, confrontations between mothers and aunts, which was stated in the program on the federal channel. It was necessary to verify the reliability of the information announced earlier, and therefore, it is necessary to conduct a confrontation. A petition for a polygraph was filed between the mothers. However, the lawyers were refused to conduct a polygraph due to the lack of necessity. It is allegedly necessary to conduct confrontations first. However, conducting a polygraph does not contradict the confrontation in any way. Also, both children underwent psychological and psychiatric examinations. Among other things, the lawyers filed a petition to conduct a so-called brood, taking evidence at the crime scene from the victim girl herself. It was very important to understand exactly how the events that the girl was talking about took place. Are there any differences between what the witnesses say? It was important to establish whether those events were possible under exactly the conditions that the girl was talking about. However, it will soon become known that most of the petitions were rejected. At the end of January 2022 year, in connection with public appeals to the leadership of the Investigative Committee of Russia, links to which were actively sent to the Information Center of the IC of the Russian Federation. In the criminal case against Danil Krasny, Alexander Ivanovich Bastrikin instructed the head of the investigative department of the Investigative Committee of Russia for the Rostov region, Aslan Garanovich Kwada, to report on the progress of the investigation. If my mother is taken away from me, I do not know who will be able to help me then. I want my case to be investigated honestly. I was branded on the soul. However, according to Kristina Solodovnikova, after contacting Bastrikin, the situation only worsened.
It's gotten worse all this time. In general, pressure began to occur on us. That is, to this day, our witnesses have not been interviewed. At the moment, the investigation is, on the contrary, somehow trying to provoke us, somehow trying to put all sorts of pressure on us. That is, they cause us hereditary actions themselves, and do not appear. Or they call me, let's say, tonight, calling for tomorrow. Although I work 2 jobs, I provided a schedule, the child has exams, schedules were also provided, and when I have consultations. When the child has exams, it seems that everything is being done on purpose.
Christina can't understand one thing, why the investigator is trying with all his might to eliminate the lawyers and do everything so that the boy has no chance to prove his innocence. Why for many months the investigator has not become interested in listening to the defense witnesses. Why can't they take off the bracelet? After all, the boy does not pose a danger to others. And why is it so difficult to prove that there was no crime? After all, apart from the words of a 6-year-old girl, the investigation still had no facts. Danil's mother, Kristina Solodovnikova, has already lost her job once due to frequent calls to the investigator. She was unemployed for 2 months in order to be freely present in hereditary actions. But during these 2 months, the investigator did not call her once. Now she works 2 jobs in shifts, which she reported to the investigator, asking if possible to take into account her work schedule. With the appointment of investigative actions, everyone tells me that since they have opened a criminal case against me under this article, they will put me in jail and say don't hope. In June 2022 year, Danil passed the state exams. He also had a schedule of exams and consultations, which the investigator was also acquainted with. But each time it turned out that the investigative actions were appointed precisely on the days of exams, consultations, and on the days when Christina worked. The hype around this case is doubts about the impartiality of the investigation, which are expressed by citizens. And also the fact that the head of the investigative committee, Bastrikin, drew attention to the story of the Volgodonsk boy. In all likelihood, the local investigation did not like them very much. According to the citizens, the investigator began to put much more effort into distracting the defense representatives from their work. Complaints were written to various instances against lawyers Danil, Dmitry Zahadyakin, and Viola Parapecheva. However, the requirements of the defense regarding the interview of witnesses have not been met. With hopeless bitterness, the accused's mother admitted that initially the investigation took the side of the prosecution. And all this time, he behaved, to put it mildly, mockingly towards the defense and Danilo himself. And the most important thing is that the investigation stood still for several months. Her son was still suspected of the crime and still continued to wear the bracelet. Danil, who graduated from the 9th grade, passed the OJ. The boy was doing well, but this whole story, as an additional stress, prevented him from studying fully. He is lost, and if in the autumn of 2021 year, he talked about plans for the future, that he wanted to become a military man, now the teenager did not know what to expect from the future. Many detractors have convinced and continue to convince him that his future has already been determined. And it is not necessary to study for such a future. And every time I hope that my lawyers will hear and see that there is nothing in the case. No new arguments or facts. In July 2022 year, the defense side had in their hands the results of a psychological and psychiatric examination that the girl had passed. The study was conducted at the National Medical Research Center of Psychiatry and Narcology, named after Serbsky in Moscow. This document is not publicly available, but, according to Danil Krasny himself, the commission's conclusions say that the girl is normal and cannot fantasize. But in the middle of this examination, it is said that some boy showed her his penis in the elevator, and also that the girl put a bottle in her underpants and told the whole street that she wanted to have sex. There are a lot of similar facts in the examination. But in conclusion, the experts said that the girl has no mental illness and is not prone to fantasizing. As for the results of the repeated polygraph examination, which Danil underwent for a long 7 hours, the result is also extremely doubtful and states that it is impossible to establish whether this boy is telling the truth or lying. Nevertheless, the results of these examinations were attached to the materials of the criminal case. Danil and his mother strongly disagree with the results of the examinations. After all, when you see one thing in a document on a dozen pages, and in conclusion quite another, there is a misunderstanding. And a fair question arises. Why? The exhausted mother and son see the answer to this question only in the fact that the investigator wants to finish this case as soon as possible. The boy believes that the investigators are trying to take the case to court as soon as possible and put him in jail at all costs. After all, there are practically no acquittals under such articles in practice. He understands perfectly well that if the case is brought to court with expert examinations in the form in which they are, his chances of acquittal decrease. If independent experts evaluate the conducted research in his favor, a precedent may occur in Russia. Danil's family opened a fundraiser for an independent examination, 150,000 rubles. The money was collected in a couple of days.
To all those who are not indifferent, who did not stand aside, who responded, who treated our situation with understanding and sympathy, thank you all.
Defense lawyer Danil Krasny, Dmitry Zahadyakin, expressed his opinion about the work of the investigation. Dmitry Konstantinovich is sure that there are a lot of gross violations in the case, which are by no means unacceptable in such a resonant and serious case. After all, in this case, without having any weighty evidence or a witness, they are trying to put a minor guy in jail, using unscrupulous methods. Moreover, the boy's lawyers, who were just trying to find the truth in this story, faced a number of attempts to illegally obstruct the implementation of advocacy. The investigation, instead of engaging in a thorough investigation of the criminal case, was engaged in writing numerous complaints to various instances against the boy's lawyers, as if wanting to eliminate the defense altogether. The strongest pressure throughout the year was exerted on both lawyers, on the accused himself, and on his mother. They have repeatedly told the local newspaper about this. Numerous complaints were received against lawyers Danil, Dmitry Zahadyakin, and Viola Parapecheva. Many people had the impression that most of their work was spent on creating problems for lawyers, rather than achieving results in the investigation, as if settling personal scores with a child who brought his grief and fear to public discussion. But after turning to the media for help, the boy was only looking for additional ways to prove his innocence to the terrible accusations. And his mother tried to achieve an honest course of investigation in compliance with the Criminal Procedure Code. It was not possible to eliminate the lawyers. Dmitry Zahadyakin and Viola Parapecheva survived all the checks and continued to defend Danil. In the fall of 2022 year, it became known that the investigator filed an application with law enforcement agencies for a lawyer for the hostess for personal insults. For insulting a representative of the authorities, any person faces punishment, and a lawyer faces career deprivation. The investigator sued Zahadyakin for allegedly insulting her in the courthouse in front of witnesses. After the investigator in the criminal case, Danil Krasny, handed over the case materials to the court, a preliminary court session took place, during which the judge unexpectedly returned the case to the investigation. Now the case was to be considered, but by a different investigator. According to Danil, before the court, the investigator announced the end of the investigative actions and told the guy to go every day and study the case materials. But he, his mother, and his lawyers, for convenience, wrote a statement so that the lawyers would familiarize themselves with the materials, and only then familiarize him. But the investigator didn't want to do that, and she said that Danil should go to her every day and get acquainted with the case materials himself. Danil's mother admitted that this approach of the investigator once again shocked her. After all, Danil did not refuse to get acquainted, and according to the law, he has the right to get acquainted with the case materials through his lawyers. Why he was forbidden to use this right is another rhetorical question.
The investigator began to put pressure on us. She called me in the evening and said that she would go to court to change the preventive measure for my son. That is, this is a lot of pressure for me for the child. That is, we are not ready for such drastic measures. We did not know that, in principle, the investigator cannot change the preventive measure now.
On the 14th of October, 2022 year, the court decided that this criminal case should be returned to the prosecutor due to the impossibility of its further consideration on the merits. This happened for one main reason. At the stage of the preliminary investigation, Danil's rights were ignored, petitions were not considered. During the preliminary investigation, the defense filed a number of petitions and requests to the investigator to take into account the interests of the minor Danil Krasny. However, they were ignored. And in the end, the court decided that a violation of the criminal procedure law would not allow the court to further consider this case on its merits. And on the 14th of October, the case was returned to the prosecutor. In particular, one of the reasons why the criminal case was returned to the prosecutor was that in September of the same year, the investigator wrote a statement against lawyer Dmitry Zahadyakin that he allegedly insulted her. In this regard, the court considered that the investigator could not, after the corresponding statement was drawn up against the lawyer, investigate this criminal case. And this is fair, according to Danil's lawyer Dmitry Zahadyakin. Danil, his mother and the lawyers did not lose hope that at the stage of the additional investigation, the witnesses of the defense country would finally be heard and that another investigator would want to understand the situation. They considered it wrong and illegal that this was not done at the investigation stage. And they were very glad that for the first time in a little over a year they were finally heard. After finishing the 9th grade, all of Danil's classmates went to graduation. But because of his criminal case, Danil had to stay at home. Then he entered the Volgodonsk Technical School of Metalworking and Mechanical Engineering. I met my new band. Classmates in this case sided with Danil. Shortly after the return of the case to the prosecutor, it became known that an appeal was filed against this decision by the prosecutor's office of the city of Volgodonsk. Procedural form of appeal against decisions of the court of first instance. The same appeal submission was later withdrawn by the prosecutor's office. But instead, an appeal was filed by the legal representative of the victim. It is interesting that the text of the complaint of the legal representative of the victim and the representation of the prosecutor are identical in meaning and wording. The country of protection believes that they do not comply with the requirements of the law and are not based on the circumstances established during the preliminary hearing. However, during the preliminary hearing, the interrogated investigator in the case could not justify her procedural actions and decisions. But contrary to the arguments of the investigator's prosecutor, the court legally, reasonably, decided that it was impossible to consider the criminal case on the merits and returned the criminal case to the prosecutor. Now the decision had to be made by the Court of Appeal. Agree with the opinion of the court of first instance or refute it. As a result, the court rejected the complaint, leaving the decision of the Volgodonsk court unchanged. And in December 2022, the case was returned for investigation. On December 26, 2022 year, Danilo changed the measure of restraint and removed the bracelet. To put it in simple words, the ban on certain actions was lifted for him. Danil's lawyers initially did not consider it a small victory. On January 25, 2023 year, a search took place in the house of Dmitry Zahadyakin, Danil's lawyer. He was informed that he had been on the federal wanted list for a month. All this is due to the alleged insult of the investigator in the case of Danil. Dmitry himself assures that he did not offend anyone and considers this accusation a provocation. Dmitry Konstantinovich was very surprised by the wanted list as he did not hide from anyone, went to work and lived an ordinary life. During the court session, the senior investigator for the investigation of particularly important cases of the investigative department of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation for the Rostov region, he petitioned for the election of a preventive measure to Zahadyakin in the form of a ban on certain actions, due to the fact that the Volgodonsk lawyer had not previously appeared on the investigator's call without giving reasons. This gave the investigator reason to believe that Dmitry Konstantinovich was hiding from the investigation and deliberately ignoring his demands. Dmitry himself considers the situation absurd. On December 23, he was put on the federal wanted list as he allegedly hid and no one found him. And on December 27, he has no idea that he is wanted. Participated in investigative actions in that investigative department in the city of Volgodonka, which is confirmed by procedural documents. In January, lawyer Zahadyakin also participated in investigative actions and in court sessions with the participation of representatives of the investigative committee in the case of Danil Krasny. But when a person is on the federal wanted list, when he is found, police officers are obliged to detain him at a meeting. But this did not happen. Until January 25, the lawyer did not suspect that he was wanted. In the Leninsky court in Rostov-on-Don, Dmitry Zahadyakin and his lawyer objected to the satisfaction of the petition, telling the court that it was unfounded since he was not hiding from anyone and did not receive a summons to the investigative body. Nevertheless, the court decided to satisfy the investigator's petition and choose a preventive measure for Zahadyakin in the form of a ban on certain actions. As it became known, initially the investigator intended to include in a number of restrictions of preventive measures also a ban on the use of telephone communication and the internet in order to completely deprive the lawyer of the opportunity to work. But the court chose a preventive measure in a different form. According to the chosen measure of restraint to Zahodyakin, the prohibition of certain actions implies the following. Dmitry Zahodyakin is obliged to appear in a timely manner at the summons of the investigator or in court, and he is also prohibited from communicating with prosecution witnesses and their relatives for the entire period of the preliminary investigation. At the Leninsky District Court, lawyer Zahodyakin immediately after the meeting expressed his point of view regarding the court's decision. I believe that all this has been done in order to actually deprive me of the opportunity to engage in professional activity in the general sense of the word. And speaking specifically, the investigative department of the Investigative Committee of Russia for the Rostov region actually wants to eliminate me from participating in a criminal case against a minor, which will be considered by the Vinsky District Court. Lawyer Zahodyakin believes that the court chose a preventive measure wrongly and unreasonably, since the main argument was that Zahodyakin allegedly tried to hide from someone. But this was not proved by anything, not confirmed by anyone, since he did not suspect that he was wanted, and, accordingly, did not make any attempts to hide from anyone. He had all his phones on. When he left the city, he notified the investigation about it. There were no actions that would indicate that Volyagin wanted to hide. Moreover, the investigator in this criminal case has never called Zahodyakin properly. There was no such thing that Zahodyakin received a summons by an official letter. The investigator himself did not make proper calls in writing or by telephone. The investigator considered the notification via messenger legitimate, regardless of when it was sent, delivered, and read, and also ignored the ban on using the messenger due to the inability to keep the personal data of citizens secret. Another fact reflecting the absurdity of the situation is that Zahodyakin is forbidden to communicate with prosecution witnesses. But he doesn't know who these witnesses are. After all, it is possible that they may be held in this case and as witnesses for the defense of Zahodyakin. After all, at the moment when he allegedly insulted the investigator, they were nearby. And they can both confirm her words and refute them. Because Zahodyakin claims that he did not insult her. But he can't communicate with them. At the same time, he does not know the names of these witnesses, as well as themselves. There is also no guarantee that there will be no provocation, and they themselves will not casually approach him to communicate, and will not record this fact in order to aggravate the lawyer's situation. After all, this may entail strengthening the preventive measure. Despite all the obstacles, Dmitry Zahodyakin continued to work on the case of Danil Krasny, by the way. Lawyer Zahodyakin is working on this case for free. An experienced lawyer, Grigory Evgenyevich Zabolotsky, undertook to defend the lawyer Zahodyakin in court. In an interview, he stated his point of view, calling the actions of a representative of the authorities outright provocations. Grigory Zabolotsky believes that Zahodyakin's accusation of insult is a provocation of pure water. The investigator simply decided to eliminate the unwanted lawyer who was in the way. And the change can be associated with only one thing, with the unreliability of explanations and testimony. Unreliability because she called witnesses who allegedly heard it. And these witnesses testify in favor of the defense. That is, Dmitry Konstantinovich. Well, I'll give you an example of a very decent deputy prosecutor. Next. So there was a witness there, who was also in the hall, said. There was a policeman in the corridor, allegedly he was walking, shouting. Yes, it's absurd at all. Dmitry Konstantinovich, he will make tea with the children for a while. Grigory Zabolotsky is sure that Zahodyakin is being accused, since it is impossible to prove the opposite. At the same time, there are no audio or video recordings of a conversation during which the lawyer would have insulted the investigator. But there are two witnesses who then allegedly turned out to be next to the investigator and allegedly heard everything. Lawyer Zabolotsky considers the accusations against Dmitry Zahodyakin to be nothing but absurd. Having known the lawyer for many years, he is sure that this person is simply not capable of such an insult. The lawyer was simply decided to be removed from the legal profession in this way, he believes. In order to establish the fact of an insult, there is a federal law on state expert activity, and there are methods. So in the methods for the expert, the methods are written, they are developed specifically. It is clearly stated that if there is no audio recording, identification in the hand of the voice, then it cannot be established. Did this person really say those words there or not? There are two examinations. The investigation appointed, where indicated to the investigator. Mr. Investigator, please provide us with documents confirming that there was an audio recording or video or something. There is no audio or video. This is an interesting separate topic. We're all there already, brother. And they write, no, we cannot conduct such an examination. The first court hearing on the most high-profile criminal case of pedophilia in Volgodonsk recently took place on Monday, March 6, 2023 year, in the Volgodonsk District Court. Since the case being considered in court concerns minors, court sessions are held in a closed format. The presence of the press at such meetings is not allowed. Therefore, it is not possible to find out details about the course of the court sessions. It is only known that the case of Danil Krasny in the Volgodonsk District Court is being considered by a panel of 3 judges. The panel included judges Ruslan Fedorov, Ekaterina Nezdorovina, Roman Gerdovoy. Almost all of the prosecution's witnesses were questioned at the court sessions that have already taken place. On the 8th of September, the arguments of the defense of Danil Krasny ended in the Volgodonsk District Court. Almost 2 years have passed since the criminal case was initiated. 9 volumes are occupied by materials on the case. Dozens of witnesses were interviewed. The state prosecutor, senior assistant prosecutor of the city of Volgodonsk, considered that Danil Krasny's guilt in committing this crime was proven and asked the judges to appoint a sentence of real imprisonment for a period of 7 years. The state prosecutor's speech in the debate was quite concise and short, for about 15 minutes. The defense debate lasted longer. The defenders performed for 2 days. The lawyers' debates lasted about 6 to 7 hours. Lawyers believe that the country of protection proved in court that not only Danil Krasny is not involved in this crime, but in general, the fact of the crime event itself was absent within the framework of the preliminary investigation. Repeatedly, from the testimony of witnesses from the expert opinion, circumstances were established that in general, in principle, as such, this event did not occur. And what the victim says in her testimony. It has not been confirmed, says lawyer Viola Parapecheva. No evidence of Danil's guilt has been found for 2 years. No one has seen what the boy is accused of. Danil's polygraph showed that the boy was telling the truth. And according to the law, a polygraph could not be assigned to a girl because of her young age. But psychologists and psychiatrists who conducted examinations of Danilo and the girl were able to draw their conclusions. At the stage of the preliminary investigation, the investigator failed to find eyewitnesses who could directly see what was happening. As part of the judicial investigation, the result is exactly the same. Not a single person has been identified who could have seen that such events really took place, or that at the same time Danil, with the participation of a minor victim, were in the place about which the victim tells directly. As part of the judicial investigation, this fact was not confirmed, as well as at the preliminary investigation. It is also important that no witnesses have appeared, although the country of the prosecution has repeatedly claimed that they will. The girl who accused Danila of harassment has also grown noticeably in 2 years and has learned to manipulate other boys. Now the girl, according to some eyewitnesses, threatens other children that if her wishes are not fulfilled, she will be able to facilitate the initiation of criminal proceedings against them. Danil's mother, Kristina Solodovnikova, went to court on the morning of September 14th in full confidence that this was the last meeting, that all this hell will now end, and her son will finally return to normal life. Danil was going to the court to hear that all charges against him had finally been dropped and was a little upset that he would miss the first practical welding lesson in college because of the meeting. For practice, Mom bought him a full outfit. The whole city was waiting for the headline news. Acquitted, innocent. On the 14th of September, 2023 year, the Volgodonsk District Court sentenced a teenager Danil Krasny. The fateful court session for the child was short-lived. It started at 11 o'clock in the morning. There was already a convoy in the courtroom before the start of the meeting. Everyone immediately understood that the verdict would be guilty. The boy will be closed today. Under the sobbing of Danil's mother, who no longer had any hope left, 3 judges entered the hall. The trial began. Everyone stood up. The chairman of the judging panel, Judge Fedorov, monotonously and fluently began to read out the verdict. It took only a couple of minutes to announce the verdict of guilty, to designate the term of punishment in the form of 6 years of imprisonment and other procedural nuances. These few minutes radically changed the fate of a child who had his own plans for life. Danila took the convoy away, and his mother could not recover for a long time, sobbing from despair and total injustice, from parting with her son for a long time, and from the fact that her life and Danil's life will never be the same again. A film crew of a local publication was waiting for the decision of the panel of judges at the courthouse. The lawyers and Danil's mother needed a little time to recover. Danila's mother Christina could not gather her strength and give an interview to the press. The woman became ill, her sugar rose sharply. Lawyers Dmitry Zahadyakin and Viola Parapecheva, extremely dissatisfied with the decision of the panel of judges, gave a detailed interview to a journalist, expressing their opinion about the injustice of the court and the absurdity of the verdict, as they say, without embellishment. Unfortunately, there are two former deputy prosecutors, one of the city of Volgodonsk, the other of the Semlyansky district, Fedorov Gerdovoy. The judge of ill health, there is a former investigator who is they are no longer able to assess events and give them a legitimate assessment, guided by the law, conscience, and so on. But at that moment, the interview was interrupted by the bailiff, saying that the film crew had no right to record an interview with a lawyer at the courthouse. Just at that moment, the deputy prosecutor came out of the main entrance. To clarify the situation, lawyer Zahadyakin went to the chairman of the court. A few minutes later, Dmitry Konstantinovich left the building, saying that there was no ban on filming, and continued the interview against the background of the front entrance to the Volgodonsky District Court. An innovation in the Volgodonsk District Court that, it turns out, filming is also prohibited here. You can't give interviews. But we have now gone to the chairman of the Volgodonsk District Court, Shapovalov, who was very surprised that, it turns out, it is possible to give interviews, and no one prevents it. Lawyer Viola Parapecheva, who defended Danil from the first days of the prosecution, in an interview with Notepad, told her opinion about today's meeting and the judge's decision. She also noted that even before the meeting began, it became clear to everyone that the verdict would be accusatory.
Even before the agreement began, a convoy came, of course, which the mother and the boy saw, and in principle everything became clear to everyone. In other words, they did not even wait to announce the results of the criminal case. They, in principle, immediately started a convoy.
And the boy Danil, whose childhood was already pretty spoiled by the investigation and the court, finally matured on that day, without his mother having put him in a car for prisoners in custody. The convicted child was taken to a temporary detention center in Semlyansk, from where, a few days later, he was transferred to the Novocherkassk pretrial detention center, where he will await consideration by the Court of Appeal of the defender's complaint. And if it is not possible to prove his innocence in the courts of the highest instance, the boy will go through the stage. That's all the boy was convicted for 6 years. It should be noted that even what the former deputy prosecutor of the city of Fedorov, Judge Fedorov, announced now. We did not even hear mitigating circumstances, that is, we were given the lowest limit. That is, in general, they believe that all this has been proven. Here is this woman who is being beaten up, she drinks. She goes to court with bruises and so on. All relatives lie about 5 unexplored genitals that were shown to her. If the whole city shows everything, and nothing was heard, even the fact that the indictment was drawn up with the grossest violations, that investigator Kolbayeva lost documents together for Zdravny, planted. Assistant prosecutor Chuvanova wore it all retroactively. This is essentially procedural, but there is no evidence for the actual circumstances. That's it. From the 1st of June, from 0 hours to 20 hours of the 24th, at night, during the day, and so on. All these events took place. After learning about the verdict, hundreds of Volgodonsk residents came to Danil's defense and created a petition in his support. They demand to review the court's decision, believing with confidence that Danil is innocent. The petition is called Danil is Innocent, and hundreds of people have already supported it in a few minutes. During the day, the number of voters exceeded 8,500 people. At the same time, the number of voters continues to grow. The number of comments on the website and on social networks is also growing like an avalanche, where the majority expressed complete indignation. They supported Danil and begged the court to reconsider the decision. They wished and wish patience to the mother and the boy himself, because, despite the verdict of the court, they considered Danil innocent. They unite and intend to help in any way, financially to the boy's mother, publicity, in other ways. Guys, to what form we will live in our country when we have guilty verdicts that break the fate of our children. We have the city of Volgodonsk crying all over. I hope that the courts of the following instances will correct junior officials. And I hope that justice will be found in this case. Danil Krasny's lawyer Viola Parapecheva appealed to people and asked them not to commit those actions that could harm the teenager.
I pay special attention to the fact that it is necessary to perform only those actions that can help the criminal case of Danil, and only any events, appeals that fit within the framework of the law can help.
The day after the trial, On September 15th, Kristina Solodovnikova gave an interview. Through tears, the inconsolable mother told how the first day passed without her son.
Just raising a child, instilling human qualities in him, generally showing him how to live in life correctly. Just cross it out. It's not enough that they terrorized us for 2 years. Well, for 2 years, well, how long can you? Well, we've already been through everything, what is possible and what is not.
Danila is still in the room. There are homemade shorts on the bed and a watch on the work desk. He took them off before leaving. On the floor is a backpack with notebooks and textbooks. Danil just recently started an internship in college. He is a student of Volgodonsk College of Metalworking and Mechanical Engineering. He studied to be a welder. Especially for practice, his mother bought him a full outfit, which the boy did not have time to put on. Kristina understands that it is necessary to hold on. She also has a younger son, Kostya, who is 5. He doesn't know where his brother is yet. Thinks he just left. During the recording of the interview, little Kostya was taken for a walk, so that he would not hear what Kristina was talking about, and crying bitterly. Mom tries as best she can to protect the boy from shock. Danila and Kostya were very close.
They know that nothing will happen to them. Just one broke the life of a child because she wanted shoulder straps, or what? She is a victim of violence herself, or I don't understand at all. She just washed her hands. That is, she didn't even try to sort something out somehow. She just handed it over to the court.
How could this happen? Why was he imprisoned for an unproven crime, and why did the court not believe Danilo? Because even the fact of the event has not been proven. Questions that do not give Kristina peace of mind. To look into the eyes of the judges is now the main desire of Danil Krasny's mother. Viola Parapecheva visited Danil in jail. Mom was not allowed to go on a date with her son. According to the lawyer, he is trying to hold on, trying to say that everything is fine, that he is not angry with anyone. But during the conversation, he always has the same question: why is this happening? He is interested in what will happen next, where he will be. He says it's very cold there. He says there's a wooden bed with a mattress on it. He is alone in the cell, says that he wraps a blanket around his legs to make it warmer. On the same day, socks, underpants, personal hygiene items and basic necessities were immediately taken to him. And some food, so that he has them. Then he will have to translate. He will be taken to a pre-trial detention center in Rostov-on-Don. He will stay there until the appeal is considered, and this may take more than a month.
Already at the end of the meeting, we communicate, and he says, "Here we seem to be talking heart to heart. This makes me afraid." And he's sitting there, his hands are just shaking, and I say to him, "Well, this is probably some kind of internal hysteria." He says, "No, it's not hysteria yet." He says, "It's still panic." I say, "How does panic differ from hysteria?" He says, "Well, I can control myself for now. Bye."
In connection with the great resonance that the case of Danil Krasny has gained, a lawyer with extensive experience, Grigory Zabolotsky, expressed his opinion on how to organize a system for selecting judges and what needs to be done, so that the work of the courts is lawful and fair. He also told who are the judges who convicted the boy Danil. The event is not proven. 2 children. As this girl lives, she will grow up. If she understands, she'll go crazy herself. And this kid who was sent to the cell now. Naturally, the most experienced, competent judges should consider cases here. Unfortunately, we have criminal proceedings every year. Every year, believe me, it is directed that the indictment is rewritten into convictions. The presiding judge, who supervised the court session, Ruslan Yuryevich Fedorov. On June 30, 2012, he was appointed by presidential decree in the Rostov region as a judge of the Volgodonsk District Court. Considers criminal cases. During 11 years of work as a judge, he considered 2,562 cases. He himself has not passed a single acquittal. In criminal cases, all the defendants were found guilty. Under his chairmanship, one criminal case was considered with the participation of jurors. Then the jury delivered an acquittal verdict. In court, on November 20, 2000 of the 17th year, a guilty verdict was passed in the Bachinsky case. For 5 years of imprisonment on March 20, 2000 of the 18th year. The Judicial Board for Criminal Cases of the Rostov Regional Court overturned the sentence passed by Fedorov and recognized the justified right to rehabilitation. The second judge who considered the case of Danil Krasny, Roman Alexandrovich Gerdovoy, was appointed to the post of judge of the Volgodonsky District Court of the Rostov region. by the decree of the President of the Russian Federation of July 22, 2015 of the year Gerdovoy. Working as a judge, he considered 1,463 criminal cases and did not pass a single acquittal. The third judge, Ekaterina Nikolaevna Nezdorovina, was appointed a judge of the Volgodonsky District Court. By presidential decree of the 30th of May, 2009 year, Ekaterina Nezdorovina. Consider criminal cases. During her work as a judge, she considered 2,942 cases. She handed down one acquittal in a minor criminal case. All other verdicts are guilty. Grigory Evgenyevich says that during the preliminary investigation, Danil Krasny was given a preventive measure in the form of house arrest. House arrests are elected and extended only by the courts. So, the judges who considered the case on the merits during the preliminary investigation extended the measure of restraint to Danila. In their court decisions, they indicated that Danil Krasny was involved in the commission of a crime, that is, they actually found him guilty even before the case was considered in court. And they were also instructed to consider the criminal case in court on the merits. When I started working in the 2002 year, there were 2.5% of acquittals. And then we were outraged there, as it is so it is. Now. So 17 people were acquitted in the regional court. Come to your senses. 0.12%. It's a horror. This is generally a terrible thing. You understand, judges work not to disassemble the substance and create, as it is written in the national law, societies of equality of the parties. Their task is to resist the accusation. From the story of an experienced lawyer, it turned out that research prosecutors are almost always appointed to the post of judges. These are statistics. What is an acquittal? An acquittal is at least a penalty for an investigator, a prosecutor, a penalty for service. In addition, if the verdict is acquitted, lawyers, acquitted, have the right to file a statement of claim in court for reimbursement of court costs of moral damage. The prosecutor sends a written notice in which he apologizes to the acquitted person on behalf of the state. The acquitted person has the right to write a statement on the initiation of a criminal case, on the fact of illegal criminal prosecution. But people, as a rule, are exhausted after 2 or 3 years of preliminary investigation and trial, and do not bring to counterstatements. Lawyer Zabolotsky believes that grave and especially grave cases should be considered by a court with the participation of jurors. My opinion is that it is necessary to change the criminal procedure in Russia, since all over the world, serious and especially serious cases should be considered by a jury. You know, they say the jury is not objective there. Oh no. I'll give you an example. For last year, 32%. And of course, people commit crimes. But is there a difference between 32 and 02? This is my subjective opinion. And then people will respect the judiciary, respect judges. Grigory Evgenyevich also recalled the story of Mikhail Goncharov in Semlyansk, when in May of the 23rd year, a jury acquitted the pastor's son, accused of attempted drug trafficking. Grigory Zabolotsky called this case unique, as there was an unthinkable fact in criminal proceedings. After all, a criminal case has never been initiated against his client Goncharov. He did not touch drugs, he did not keep anything, which means that according to the law, he could not be charged. But the investigator still brought charges. When this case was brought to court, this investigator was retired. And there can be a lot of such examples. Statistics on acquittals in the region are so insignificant that they amount to much less than 1%. Judges have been working 4 decades and in fact, none of the accused are acquitted. If there are as many as 0.13% of acquittals according to statistics, it means that the remaining 99 as many as 0.87%, like Danil Krasny, failed to prove their innocence to the court. Then some confrontations began between the editorial office of the newspaper Notepad, which covered Danil's case from the very beginning, and his lawyers, and Kristina Solodovnikova, Danil's mother. The disagreements concerned the issue of participation in the case of public figure Ekaterina Gordon. Each country made its own arguments. Ekaterina Gordon herself also spoke out. I think it's too early to understand this issue, so I'll just post a video with statements from each of the parties in the Telegram channel, and you decide for yourself which side you are on. Former homeroom teacher Danil Krasny, his classmates and their parents at the next school meeting at the Chance Gymnasium, decided to talk together and discuss what happened to Danil Krasny. Danil has been studying in this class since the 6th grade. He was doing well, was in good standing with teachers, and was friends with all the guys in the class. When a criminal case was opened against Danil in 2021 year, everyone in the class was horrified. It's not about Danil at all. Alessia Anatolievna Anufrinko was Danil's homeroom teacher for 4 years. She says that the guy always showed respect to both classmates and teachers. I have always stood for truth and justice. He was a reliable friend, a reliable assistant, and a good student. When Danil was accused of a dirty and indecent act, the school did not turn away from him. On the contrary, we tried to support him. But overflowing with emotions, always cheerful and sympathetic, Danil became sad and even closed off.
We hope that our words will be heard, and we will live, study, work, where justice and justice still rule.
Danil and his friends support him. All with one voice declare that Danil is not capable of such a thing. They know him well, believe in his innocence, and hope that he will be released home. Having expressed support for the boy, with whom they studied side by side for many years, children and adults did not disperse for a long time. Indignation overwhelms these people from the injustice of the court and fear for the future of other children. After all, no one is immune from slander. And as it turned out, it is impossible to prove your truth to investigators and judges. Good guy. That is, he couldn't do it, I immediately realized. I remember him as a very kind person. I hope that everything will be fine.
We hope that if Danil is acquitted, that he will return.
He is a positive, non-confrontational person as much as possible. Let's recall some similar criminal cases in which the accused were stipulated by the alleged victims. In the 2018 year of 61-year-old Sergei, the complainant was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Under Part 4 of Article 132 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. Sexual violence against minors. Sergei was carrying leaflets around the entrances, one of which was visited by classmates. Then two schoolgirls said that this man came into the entrance, overtook the girls on the stairs, took off his pants in front of them, lifted his jacket, and showed the penis. Judging by the CCTV cameras, Sergei spent 1 minute and 37 seconds on all this. After the verdict was announced, the girls decided to confess to their parents that they made it all up because they skipped school. So that their parents wouldn't scold them, they made up a rape story. An unknown man was chosen as the villain because they thought that the police would not find him in case of proceedings anyway. One of the girls, along with her mother, recorded a video in the name of the president in which she admitted that she had slandered a man.
Look, it's all not true because we decided to say it because we didn't want to be scolded, because we ran away from lessons, and we wouldn't want a person to sit. We didn't think that it would be so.
As a result, in April of the 22nd year, the Kosminsky Court of Moscow reclassified Sergei's actions of the complaint against Part 3 of Article 135 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. Indecent acts against minors. He was sentenced to 6 years of imprisonment with serving in a correctional colony of a strict regime. That is, the obviously innocent man was not released. He's still sitting there. The next case. In April 2000 of the 19th year, fitness trainer Alexei Sushko was sentenced to 6 years in prison under the article Violent Acts of a Sexual Nature. According to investigators, in November of the 2017 year, Sushko touched himself in intimate places in the lobby of the fitness club where he worked. At that moment, a 7-year-old girl was sitting next to him on the sofa. In the evening of the same day, Alexei was detained and later arrested. The story received a great public response because of the video from the cameras. Many did not see any crime in the actions of the young father.
And the conclusion of the examinations also confirms the guilt of the defendant.
On the 1st of August, 2023 year, when Alexei had already served more than 5 years of imprisonment in a high-security colony, a new trial was held in the case of the coach. The solution was as follows: to replace the convicted drying Alexei Konstantinovich with the unserved part of the sentence. According to the verdict of the Upper Osetsky District Court of November 8, 2018 year, in the form of 3 months and 17 days of imprisonment, a milder type of punishment in the form of forced labor for a period of 3 months and 17 days, with the deduction of 10% of the convicted person's salary to the state income. In other words, the person was not acquitted, they simply replaced the measure of restraint. The stigma will remain for life.
Who allowed our family and specifically Alexei, to break their lives. Who gave the right to that? Are you salt gods gathered here?
Another case. In the 2015 year, 26-year-old Roman Radovanyuk from Serpukov received 12 years in prison for pedophilia. Roman lived in the same apartment with his 27-year-old girlfriend Yulia Ivanova, her 4-year-old daughter Vika, and a woman named Elena. Elena was the mother of Ivanova's ex-boyfriend, who went to the zone to serve time. After her son's arrest, she had nowhere to live, and Yulia and Roman kindly allowed her to live with them. Cramped, but not offended. However, Elena hoped that when her son gets out of prison, he will continue his relationship with Julia. There was only one obstacle left, Yulia's new roommate Roman. And Elena decided to get rid of him. She asked Yulia's daughter, 4-year-old Vika, to say that Roman touched the girl there. Vika told her mother so. Before writing a statement to the police, the girl tried to solve the issue with the abuser of the child on her own. Together with her lover, she came to Radovanyuk's apartment, where she tortured and killed Roman's father. Already during the investigation of the pedophilia case, the girl, who was allegedly molested by Roman, said that she had slandered the young man at the request of Aunt Lena. A polygraph test also showed that Radovanyuk did not commit depraved acts, but this was not enough for the court. Roman was found guilty. Just think about it. 12 years in prison for the words of a girl. Roman has repeatedly contacted me on social networks with a request to make his case public. You, as viewers, write in the comments whether you will be interested in hearing his story. There are hundreds of such stories in which innocent people are found in the dock every year. Finally, remember the tragic story of 48-year-old Dmitry Chekvarkin from the Sverdlovsk region. This case was previously covered on the channel. The man became a victim of violence, which was provoked by a joke of two girls, 3 and 10 years old. The children told their parents that they were touched below the waist. On that day, the mother of one of the girls was drinking alcohol with her friends, one of whom had previously been convicted. The enraged woman called her roommate on the phone. They called another friend and went to the dacha where Dmitry Chekvarkin was staying. The men began to beat and torture in a monstrous way. The whole body, and especially the victim's face, were very badly disfigured. Surgeons performed several operations on Dmitry, but the man's heart could not stand it, and he died. In the end, I would like to ask all of you to express your opinion. Do you believe Danil Krasny that he did not commit what he is accused of? Write your opinion in the comments.
How many songs haven't been written yet? Tell me, frog, about the pain. In the city, we are residents on the settlements. Should we lie like a stone or burn like a star? A star. My son, look at me. My palm turned into a fist. And if there is gunpowder, a fire. That's who, according to him, the strong and brave, laid down their heads in the field. Together. Mind, yes, I stand with a firm hand. I'm standing. My son, you are not the intention. It's time to ask in the palm of your hand. It's gone. And you're the fire. That's it. You're mine. With whom are you meeting the tender dawn now? With you, without you. Head on the shoulders of the patient. My palm turned into a fist. And you are gunpowder. Give me fire. That's it. And you are gunpowder. Give me fire. That's it.